I think this leads us into another conversation point that you and I regularly have. Pennsylvania is considering, I should say loosely, the implementation of a regional greenhouse gas initiative, RGGI. And when I say considering, there are some people who are pushing it through and some people who are trying to stop it. One of the strengths of our PJM grid is that it's built up the way it is now, and it works. And what would the impacts of a RGGI type proposal or some other type of carbon cap and trade program have, not only in Pennsylvania, but to the PJM grid as all? I'm worried that, again, artificially controlling or trying to change what's already going on could present problems for us in our grid down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you have to, you have to raise questions anytime government's trying to dictate what our energy portfolio and grid ought to look like. If we haven't learned lessons from everything we've talked about with Texas, California last August, the foreign examples that we've seen is that anytime government tries to micromanage, it usually doesn't work out for the benefit of consumers, and not necessarily as we traditionally think about cost. Cost is important, absolutely, but we're talking life and death right now, and we saw that play out. And so the ability to deliver that, in real time to heat and power homes, hospitals, et cetera, is critically important. The regional greenhouse gas initiative that you mentioned is under consideration, and for your audience to be clear, the governor is pushing this. There is strong opposition from the Republican-controlled House and Senate. They've passed legislation that says, one, Governor, we think that you're exceeding your authority, and this is such a big policy decision. It needs to be made in partnership with the legislature, not simply in brief consultation that can be ignored, but actual true partnership if we were going to go down this road. But to the broader point, I think there are legitimate questions anytime that we think with artificial political boundaries that a state is, that we're going to affect an issue as broad as climate change and global warming. Compared to, are we simply going to, to push emissions to other states? And as you push emissions to other states that are not participating, think Ohio, West Virginia to our west and southwest, you're pushing capital investment. In the modern Marcellus age, and I'll categorize that 2008 through the present, we have seen a significant amount of private capital investment, no taxpayer dollars, for Pennsylvania, northward of $13 billion in new electric power generation right here in Pennsylvania. Significant benefits that we can all appreciate. What kind of signal are we sending to the jobs and the investment there if we're going to say that your best laid business plans, government's going to throw those by the side under the guise of addressing climate change? Nobody's here denying climate change or the need to control emissions, but it's the pathway that's being pursued, when at the end of the day, it might take what is a strength here in Pennsylvania and within PJM and shift it outside of the Commonwealth. And a lot of people are having a pretty healthy conversation about whether that's in our interest.
And I'm concerned because it's not just the member states of PJM that are participating in this. You have states that are part of other grids that complicate this discussion. Jude, I know you were dusting off some research and some stuff you had done on RGGI in the past. What are your positions on RGGI, Pennsylvania's consideration of it, or the program as a whole?
Yeah, obviously don't like it. I think it's very dangerous. And these other states would love, it's a misery loves company. I mean, these other states would love for us to jump in it, whether it's, the 9 other states that are in it. New Jersey has just got back into RGGI. You basically have a situation where we would be the only producer, an energy producer that's in that system. And guess what? We're a key supplier. So these other states are getting their gas from Pennsylvania. I don't think that's something that gets recognized enough. But my understanding is that, in as Pat said, it's all the governor's baby, so to speak. And I've seen that an independent review had recommended suspending that for a year. Hopefully that comes to pass. That was the last I saw it. But Pat's exactly right as far as climate change goes. And I'm of the opinion that you cannot claim national or domestic climate change benefits when climate change, by definition, is a global problem. So if we reduce our own emissions, what's that? And we're going to hurt ourselves. Well, there's about 500,000 megawatts of coal capacity under construction right now. That's like, double Texas or whatever it is. It's 500,000 megawatts of coal capacity. That's about half of what we have for everything, which is why I am a huge supporter of LNG exports, because it's lower emission than coal is. And you had also mentioned, we don't need regulation to this degree. We've already seen that we don't, because the United States has been credited by the International Energy Agency as lowering our CO2 emissions faster than any other country in the history of energy. That's not my words. That's not your words. That's the word of the International Energy Agency, who is the energy advisor to the 38 OECD countries, which are basically the richest countries in the world. They've credited us directly for using gas. We don't need these over-regulations that Europe has had. And oh, by the way, they have 3 to 4 times, their electricity prices are 3 to 4 times higher than ours are here in the United States.
Those are great points there as well. And I appreciate you shedding some light on there. And people just don't appreciate, I think, outside of this country, how much other people around the world have to pay for that energy. Pat, if you could clarify, I think there's a lot of misinformation about what RGGI actually does and what the tax dollars or the dollars generated from the fees associated with it, where do they actually go or where are they spent? Because I think that's probably the other big misconception is somehow or another this improves our climate change efforts, but yet where do those dollars go?
Sure, absolutely. And for your audience, I'll briefly paint how RGGI is supposed to work as envisioned. Basically, if you are a power generator in Pennsylvania or in the RGGI states right now, and the RGGI states, as Jude said, New Jersey, New York, the Mid-Atlantic states, if you are a power generator of 25 megawatts or more, generally, you have to purchase one allowance for every ton of carbon dioxide that you emit. So Pennsylvania combined is about equal to all the other RGGI states. So Pennsylvania's entry into RGGI is frankly a game changer, and it's a significant upsetting of the current apple cart right there. The governor's proposal and the modeling that we've seen looks northward of $250 to $300 million a year in tax revenue. And I say tax revenue because that's what it is. You're paying for each ton of carbon that is emitted without credit for where we've come from since 2008. And it's significant, the decline since then. The governor has proposed right now to spend that money on renewable energy efficiency, a lot of pet projects, hasn't been very specific about it, other than it's sort of in that bucket. Other states have looked to use that money to reimburse low-income residents on increase of their electric bill, which just sort of begs the question of it's cyclical dollars now. I'm going to take out of one hand and I'm going to give you some of it back with the other hand. As well. The governor's he's boxed himself in on his path by not engaging with the legislature meaningfully, because by not doing so and not having the color of law, they're very limited on how those dollars can be spent. And so one is left to conclude when you look at the data and DEP's own modeling, not mine, not Jude's, not yours, DEP's own modeling shows that 75% of the reduction of carbon emissions in Pennsylvania are offset by increases in other states that would not happen but for Pennsylvania's entry into RGGI. So it begs the question whether RGGI or a scheme set up like that is really about reducing carbon emissions or if it's simply about generating money.
Well, and then I wanted to add that as we wrap up here in conclusion, maybe the viewers of this program will think a little bit more about this. These sources of revenue, whether it be RGGI or a proposed severance tax or whatever, are claimed on one hand to be a climate reducer, but on the other hand, require the increased production or the increased utilization of those products to continue generating the revenue source that's going to thus be then invested into something else. So again, from my standpoint, being more of a free market capitalist, believing that the energy industry has actually done more in terms of climate reduction at its own direction and or working in tandem with people versus being forced into doing it is a more proactive force versus this idea that somehow or another we're going to tax our way to a reduced climate environment. I see it counterintuitive. It's convoluted. It creates more questions, and I don't know if anyone's ever really going to have the answers for it. As we wrap up here, Jude, I'm going to give you the first opportunity. Closing thoughts, Texas, PJM, energy around the world. What do our viewers need to hear?
Yeah, a lot of it is, we'll see how this plays out. Like I said, I just hope it doesn't get too political, but that's almost impossible to imagine it won't. But a lot of this, the overall, the misconnections out there, the misdirections that were being led. And a great example of this, and I always use this one example, is wind and solar power. They're sources of electricity. So even when you hear the fact that it's wind and solar energy, that's not really true. Electricity is a part of the pie. The energy is the overall pie. It's a slice. Wind and solar are a slice. Energy is the pie. So they only compete in the electrical sector. Wind and solar power have absolutely nothing to do with our gasoline usage. We use about 400 million gallons of gasoline every day. 400 million gallons of gasoline. Wind and solar, more wind farms, more solar plants will do nothing to reduce that. It's just this misconnection that we're not having an honest conversation about the limitations of certain energy resources, and hopefully we get some of that out of Texas. But I wouldn't hold my breath.
Well, Jude, I think you're setting yourself up for another one of these Think About Energy discussions. Pat, I want to kick it over to you. Closing thoughts. What should we take away from this, especially here in Pennsylvania this year, 2021, from an energy standpoint?
Sure, absolutely. I think that we need to appreciate sort of how well we have it to an extent. That government serves a role. This is not an anti-regulation, anti-government approach. It serves a role to ensure that energy is produced and delivered safely, predictably, that when you turn the lights on or the heat on, it's going to be there. So we've set up constructs like that. We've talked about them here today with PJM and capacity auctions and markets. Those things are important. But at some point, government then needs to step out, not be concerned with where the energy is coming from, presuming it's done safely and responsibly, of course, but let the market reward and incentivize that. We have a good system here in Pennsylvania. We have a diverse portfolio. We have capacity auctions that ensure that the electricity is going to be there. And I would strongly urge our policymakers that we don't fiddle around so that we end up having crises like they do in Texas, in California.
Well, thank you again, Pat. Jude, really appreciate everything. And for the viewers watching this, we will continue to bring this type of content. We will continue to produce both live and recorded events on the Think About Energy briefing webinar series, and we look forward to hosting you again soon. So keep an eye out. Both Pat and Jude and myself are very active on Twitter, social media, and we continue to find ways to engage and interact with folks. Reach out to us. We'd love to communicate with you. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you.